I'm curious, coming in, learning about the industry, what sort of things really stood out to you that you were like, wow, I can't believe they do it that way, or man, these guys really got this part figured out?
The parallels and similarities between the banking industry and the pharma industry is...
Curious for your take on this biotech funding cycle coming out of COVID. You know, what's your hot take on what's going on with that?
It's interesting that they kind of balance each other out. We've seen a lot of large pharma having...
So what they're doing is they're using AI to help them make a virtual patient, a digital twin of an actual patient based on data that they've collected.
I think absolutely will make things faster if we can, prove that it's...
Welcome to the BioTalk Unzipped podcast, where we unzip the stories behind medical progress by sharing the latest and greatest advances in biopharmaceuticals and medical technologies in a fun, entertaining, and enlightening format. And now your co-hosts, Gregory Austin and Dr. Chad Briscoe.
Scott, as a relative newcomer to the pharma industry, you know it's 5 years or so, I guess, but you bring kind of a fresh perspective. We Greg and I, and most of our guests, really our whole careers for the most part, have been in the pharmaceutical area. I'm curious, coming in, learning about the industry, what sort of things really stood out to you that you were like, wow, I can't believe they do it that way, or man, these guys really got this part figured out, versus say the tech and finance space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came from primarily really the banking industry. So the first thing I'd say to you, and the viewers may find this interesting, the parallels and similarities between the banking industry and the pharma industry is eerily similar, actually. The market landscape is similar, where you have large pharma and lots of biotechs. In the banking world, particularly in the United States, you have large banks and you have lots of community banks. Very similar structure of the market. In the banking world, everything really is very regulated, as it should be, by the FDIC, right? And there's a lot of things that drives. Similarly, in the pharma industry, everything regulated by the FDA, as it should be, drives a lot of things in the pharma industry. Both being regulated industries, that does slow innovation. It does, no doubt. And I saw it in the banking industry, where people are a little bit more slow to make changes, simply because of the regulatory potential risk. I'm seeing the same thing happen here. There's definitely my take on this industry, and I think you probably would agree. It is a very risk-averse market.
Yes.
Some of that's regulatory driven. Some of it's tied to, I think the fear of, hey, I don't want to be the one to make the change and put my neck out on the line.
Right.
If it goes poorly, that's on me. If it goes well, someone else is going to take the credit anyway for it. So looking at EDCs, for example, in clinical trials, like the big EDCs, it took, 20, 30 years for those to really become the norm, and you're using technology from way before, right? Same thing that we're seeing. I mean, Sharpies on tubes to scanning barcodes. I mean, come on, right? We're not doing the same innovation on the tech side that we are in the research part of this industry, where you're discovering new molecules and whatnot. So I think that's all driven partially because it's risk aversion. People are really sensitive to putting their neck out on the line, but also there's some regulatory impact on that. So here's a case in point.
Yeah.
So TruLab is a vendor, a technology vendor, just like all the tech vendors out there, who has to be quality validated, right? Just part of the business. We've gone through several of those, right? We know the drill. What's interesting is we are even using a company like us, or maybe a smaller one that doesn't have as many operations in place for information security or the quality that you'd expect. That may be deemed a bigger risk than the same way we've been doing it. But in reality, using paper and doing the same way we've been doing things is way worse than using a technology vendor where maybe they're not as, been around as long, right? So I think that's an example of where there's regulatory slows to innovation, which is a shame. Those are the first things that pop to mind when you ask that question, though.
Yeah, no, that's really.
And talking about quality, how are you managing data integrity with your mobile devices, and do they work in the same way, or are there other considerations or concerns with decentralized trials?
Interesting. Yeah, they do work in the same way for decentralized trials, right? I mean, the way our mobile app works, it could be on an app, whether it's in someone's home, at like a drug, a pharmacy, or at the clinical site. So that's universal. In fact, we started the company before DCT became as exciting as it became during the pandemic, right?
Right.
But yeah, quality is really what we do, in essence, right? I never really expected that to be kind of where we were going when we started the company. But if we're making a way more efficient, modernized way of capturing information, that's all about quality in the end, right? At the end of the day. And we're replacing paper, which we all know is not going to be quality, and it's going to then have to be rekeyed in, which will be error prone, and there's another hit to quality. So how are we doing it is we've built from the beginning in our company, and we knew this because we had a very robust quality system at SageWorks. Because if you're in banking, you're expected to have very high quality systems and information security, right? Because you're talking about people's money, right?
Yeah.
And you got to get those calculations right, right? Right. So being quality is like core to software, especially if what you're delivering is better quality. So since the beginning, we really built out our quality systems. I'm proud of that. I think there's tons of lessons learned from what we did in the banking world at that company, at SageWorks. And the way audits and quality is reviewed in both industries is the same. It's the same. Audit's the same. They're asking the same questions. It's really amazing how similar they are. I think coming into this, I had no expectation of that, but it really has been eye-opening.
Yeah, in around 2001, we hired our first software validation specialist, and actually we hired her out of the banking industry or finance. I can't remember exactly what it was, but she came in and she's like, man, it's really clear people care more about their money than they do their health care, because we've been doing this software validation. The pharma industry hadn't really been doing it. You'd run the software, it works, it's all good, but you hadn't really been doing it up until that point. She's like, people clearly care more about their money than they do their health care in the pharma industry, because up until that point, and again, just for the listeners, that was 2001, so it's been some time, but very different industry now. But it's still funny.
Yeah, banking's pretty risk averse too, but I would say they're probably 10 years ahead in a lot of ways in pharma as far as just industry advancing on the development side. That is
right. So thinking about that banking and finance side of it, I'm sure you follow the financial and funding markets pretty closely in biotech. I'm curious for your take on this biotech funding cycle coming out of COVID. Biotech funding seemed to go way up in COVID. It dipped down. It seems to be ticking up. What's your hot take on what's going on with that?
Wow. It certainly has been a roller coaster, right? Like it was a totally different world from when we started the company, and back in 2020 and 2021. What's interesting is we have kind of two sides of our business, right? We have a biotech serving side and then a large pharma side, and they don't seem to be aligned, which is good for us because we can diversify a little bit, but we never know which one's going to be going and which one's not. So it's interesting that they kind of balance each other out. We've seen a lot of large pharma having a lot of reorganizations, a lot of programs cut, and then that causes a lot of standstills in what's going on in innovation. So we've seen that more this year. Last year was more biotech said we're pausing everything until we can figure out how much funding we have. It does seem to be ticking back up a little bit, Chad, this year.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is good for our business, but it's also good to see. I think some of that absolutely is driven by interest rates, right? Certainly.
Yeah.
Just that is a factor. The pandemic was this other macro factor that comes in and it's a driver. Like certainly I can't give you a sense on where it's going, but it is massive for a company like ours who's got this disruptive technology, right? Yeah. No one's going to look at a disruptive technology when it's like, okay, let's cut to everything and only what we know, right? That's not a time when they try something that's, even though it makes sense, it's new, right? So that's a factor for our business, and it's a factor for any kind of business who's trying to disrupt things.
And I feel like in an election year, things always slow down, regardless of whether you're blue or red or purple or green. It just people want to wait until they have more certainty, and and depending on who ends up winning this crazy thing, it's gonna pause or it's gonna accelerate, and after probably 6 months after, everybody will. I don't know. Who knows what normal is, but we'll be back on maybe a more predictable trajectory, I hope.
Right.
Well said. Yeah. Hoping for the same.
Yeah.
All right, Chad. It's time for new news.
New news.
Digital twinning, clinical trials powered by AI. And this is an interesting blog by Sanofi, and that's the name of it. The article explores this concept of digital twinning, and I'll explain kind of what that is. So what they're doing is they're using AI to help them make a virtual patient, a digital twin of an actual patient based on data that they've collected. And so what they're doing essentially is they're running these simulations based on what they know about how these drugs work, about how patients typically will react, and then they will take that information, that simulation, and then they will test it in a small study. And what they've shown is that those results have been fairly predictable in terms of what the simulation is showing is actually what's happening in real life. So it's most effective right now for diseases that have well understood biological pathways, things like single gene mutations, but efforts are underway to expand its use in more complex diseases like cancer. But what are your thoughts of this idea of using virtual patients to accelerate drug development? It's very fascinating. How do you see this impacting the speed and efficiency of clinical trials in the future?
Yeah, I love it. I don't know. Is a short answer. How do I see it impact? I think this is exactly what we need to be doing, is iterating on things like this, using technology that we now have today rather than the same old that we've been using for hundreds of years in clinical trials. So I love it. I think absolutely will make things faster if we can prove that it works and that it's effective. But you think about the time going into a clinical trial. It's enrolling patients and like all of these things, which that could potentially just knock out, like just eliminate, right? So, and you're not going to get away from all of the traditional stuff, certainly, but this might be a way to augment some of the easier ways to cut corners and get new therapies faster, which is what we all want, right?
But if you could run multiple simulations, right, on different compounds or different dosings, and get some reasonable output of what they think is going to happen in the patient, that could certainly save a lot of time in eliminating the things they're pretty sure are not going to work.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, look, what I see a lot of uses of tech that irritate me when I see this is they try to go boil the ocean, right? So I think if they can take pieces that are inefficient and just knock those out first, and then over time layer in technology like this or others, that's where you can really pick up efficiency. Don't try to boil the ocean one fell swoop. Do it in pieces. And go after the parts we're doing today that are stupid, that we're doing it the way we're doing it. Like
there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in
data,
there,
come on, it's stupid.
Yeah. Right. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
You say that it's, bioanalytical labs in particular, since that's the space I know. I mean, I would guess less than half of the bioanalytical labs are digitized, at least with electronic lab notebooks, and there's still, most of them are still the same thing, pen to paper, right? And it's just hard to believe that that's where we're at. You would almost think it'd be unacceptable in today to operate that way. Yeah, another just a call out to my alma mater for my PhD at University of Nebraska. There's actually a digital twin innovation hub. Professor, I don't know all the professors that are involved in it, but Tom Helikar has it's actually it's actually a model of a human immune system, obviously a digital, model of human immune system. And one of the challenges they have is simply computing power. So it's like they can build the models, they can build the math, they can put these things together, but it makes you really appreciate how complex the human body is. That in today's day and age, when you think about the massive AI and the servers and what we feel like is massive computing power today, it's still some of this is just limited by power of the computers. In Nebraska, it surprises people when they hear amazing things out of Nebraska. But Nebraska has one of the most powerful computers in the world. Actually, it's underneath their football field, which is kind of cool as well, right? Two of the more powerful places in Nebraska, I guess, the football field and the computer center underneath it. But
that's the best kept secret in Nebraska, right there.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah,
cool.
it may be. So yep. Anyway, it's just
interesting.
Interesting little tidbits about Nebraska. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Scott, if you could go back to any point in your career and give yourself one piece of advice, when would it be, and what would you say?
Yeah. Okay. So I got to need a quick answer on that one because I know it, and that is I wish I could have gone back to when I was just graduating from UNC Chapel Hill, and said, "Hey, Scott, you got to find the career for you is the intersection of what you're good at and what you like to do." So it took me a while to learn that. And what I look, there's things I'm good at that I don't necessarily like to do, right? I was able to work the political corporate ladder at a large company, but I hated it, right? There is also things that I like to do that I'm not good at, such as tennis. That's my example always. But yeah, right. So you got to find it's an intersection, right? For scientists and mathematicians, it's the intersection of what you're good at and what you like to do. Because if you're good at something, and you like to do it, it fuels your energy to keep getting better. If you're good at something, you can always keep getting better. Everybody can get better. And that creates happiness. So then the second part of that is the second thing I would tell myself at 22 is you got to find what you have fun in your career. I'm fortunate, and I tell my team here at TruLab, I'm fortunate that for the first time in my career, I look forward to the weeks as much as I do the weekends. And I hope everyone finds that in their career. It took me, till I was in my 40s to reflect about that and to find that. But what it boils down to is you got to have fun with what you're doing. That doesn't mean everything we do is fun in our career. Certainly it isn't. But if you're having fun with what you're doing, you're actually going to be better at it. And you're going to be more effective and more efficient and more productive and more successful. Where it's not like the gym. So I always thought, until I was in my mid-40s, I always thought work was like the gym. No pain, no gain, grind, you got to get through all the hard stuff, right? But no, you can actually be better if you're having fun. And I don't mean playing ping pong. You see these like startup tech companies and they just ping pong and foosball. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actually enjoying the impact in what you're doing and accomplishing. And that if you find that, and if I'm talking to myself when I'm 22, if I found that early, I would probably have gone certain paths differently, maybe. So it's just knowing that I guess is key, and that's one of our principles and values. Going back to the values conversation, one of our values at TruLab is have fun, right?
And that's
so the job is the ping pong. Yeah.
Or is it beer pong? I don't know.
Beer pong. Yeah.
So no, I think that's excellent advice, especially for young people, and I'm trying to impress that upon my 15-year-old right now. It's totally falling on deaf ears because he really didn't know what he wants to do. He just because we talk about it sometimes. I'm trying to motivate him in terms of grades, and getting good grades is going to give you more choices, and you can have better decisions upon what you really want to do. And he's like, I don't care. I just want to work a job and then have enough free time later to draw and play music. I'm like, okay. but that's not the fulfillment you're going to get in life, right? And so I'm curious, Scott, those two things, what are those two things for you that you're good at and that you like?
So I am good at starting things, like starting a new company, right? And I like being in a smaller team. So when I was CEO of a company that grew to be a larger company, I had less and less fun as we became larger. I became a CEO where it mattered that I was wearing a hoodie, right? I was the CEO where I had to be formal with people. I'm not formal at all. I couldn't pick on people's shoes because they no longer felt like they could pick on mine back because I was the big CEO, right? I want to be in a smaller place where I can be just me, right? And so that's what I'm good at, and that's what I like to do.
Is there a particular book, experience, or mentor that had a profound impact on your personal or professional journey?
Oh boy, book or mentor. Well, the first thing I would say, yes. So yes, let me go to mentor. There's a couple I want to mention. Brian Hamilton was the CEO initially and founder of SageWorks. He brought me on when I was just a kid. He had, basically helped me as CEO, and he stepped back as more of a chairman role. Everything I've learned in business really goes back to Brian and being patient and helping me through. And we were both learning together as we were building the company because it was a disruptive technology company. But he taught me materiality, judgment, like so much. And every day, every hour, I use stuff that I learned from Brian Hamilton at TruLab, right? So I'll be forever thankful to him for putting faith in me to lead SageWorks. That's the first name that comes to mind. The second one would be my two Scoutmasters, right? I mean, I was in Scouts. You mentioned I was an Eagle Scout earlier on. Yeah. Scouting taught me a lot about character and DNA stuff that's so critical to running a successful organization, whether it's a business, a nonprofit, whatever. And it goes back to things that we learned kind of in our core. We had a Scout law. I had like themes and values, talking about that. That we by the way, the first law, the first point of the Scout law is trustworthy. The first value of TruLab is trustworthy, right? It's not a coincidence that those are the same. But character and just treating people with respect and humble and like those things I learned from my two Scoutmasters, who were volunteers. They were never paid. They raised us basically as leading. At that time, Scouting was just boys. It's co-ed now. They led us and set examples and were volunteers. And for me, that was really big because Dad was ill at home, and Scouting gave me like a place that was more comfortable and happy and great lessons. So those are the ones that popped to mind.
Oh, it's very good. Thanks for sharing that. So speaking of fun, what do you do to unwind and stay balanced outside of the fast-paced world of startups and innovation?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned tennis. So actually I have three daughters, and all three of them play tennis, so I'll mess with them occasionally. I also get to watch. One just graduated from college, one's in high school, one's just starting middle school. I get to watch tennis. I'm a really great tennis spectator. I'm a better spectator than I am player.
So two out of three are beating you on a regular basis, or is it all three?
Right. No, and my wife's a tennis player too, so I'm 0 for 4. I'm like
fantastic.
That's excellent. Well, we have a new tradition here at BioTalk Unzipped in which the last speaker will write a question for the next speaker of something they would like to know about, but they have no idea who the next speaker is going to be.
Okay.
So this last question is from our last guest last month, Jim Shin, and he would like to know, Scott, what is your opinion about the Inflation Reduction Act and its impact on innovation in pharmaceutical development.
Jeez Louise. Oh, boy.
It's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. Do I have to have a smart answer for that? Because I think I would need some time to think about having a smart answer. I think any kind of regulation, this is a general answer, any kind of regulation, if it gets out of entrepreneurs and innovators' way, is good, right? So I like, if that means reducing the costs of things, right? Making it easier for entrepreneurs to get in and iterate, because that's what we do, right? We don't know the answers. We just know how to do trial and error, right? So anything that can help us do that is going to be something that I'm going to support. Reducing inflation is huge. That impacts us all. It's economics, right? So it's going to be how much I have to pay people I bring on. It's going to be how much my costs are and whatnot. How it relates to this space, if hard to say. Anything economics is so hard. It's all raveled together, and it's always hard to know what the right answer is with regards to what policy to put in place. But I'm a supporter of getting stuff out of the way of innovators and entrepreneurs. So that's generally going to be my answer. So if I'm going to look through that lens when I'm evaluating it, if that makes sense. That's not really an answer, great cop-out non-answer, but that's kind of how I would evaluate it.
I look at economics in the same type of way, but through a different lens, because my background is psychology and developmental psychology. And one of the things that we're always really battling up against is it nature, is it nurture? It's always an interaction effect. It's not like in chemistry where you put two compounds together, you're always going to get the same reaction. You never know, and there's always outliers. And I think the economy it's very complex like that, because you don't know what inputs are going to have which reactions, and is it more one thing or is it more another thing? And then you have all these other influences that can change things. And sometimes there's a curveball you didn't think of, and that takes you in a really good positive direction, or it spirals downward. So. I agree with you. It's a tough one to answer. I would struggle with the same. Chad, do you have any commentary on that at all?
I was going to say almost exactly what Scott said, where anything to reduce inflation, so you can that can get to be a political discussion about whether it's successful or not, right, and how that's going to impact. And I think usually one president does something, the next one benefits or suffers, right? It's not that's where I sometimes wonder, about all this political discussion. But unless regulations are going to open up opportunities for entrepreneurs. Too few regulations in a space like pharma industry can cause issues down the road with irresponsible development, and do you need price controls on pharmaceuticals, because if there's a very limited market and then people simply don't get access to medications. And so it's that's a whole podcast in itself that Jim asked us to embark on. It's great to touch on it, and then the good news is Scott gets to pay it forward to the next person.
Yes, you do.
With the question, the tough question.
So offline we'll ask you to come up with the question, to email me to ask the next person, which would be helpful. Yeah. Awesome. Chad, do you have anything else?
I don't. No, Scott, really appreciate you jumping in here. Great discussion. Just really insightful. So many just little clips and blurbs and things. I apologize. Or I'm sorry that I didn't write them down right as I was going. When I listen to it, I'm gonna write down 3 or 4 of those comments you make. They were good ones. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys for having me. This is fun. Appreciate it.